Hey, let's make chicken bacon ranch dip. Hey, baking soda versus baking powder. But first, I want to show you the most delicious thing you can do with chicken stock. Hey, let me tell you why I have the best followers on this whole entire app.
So today's dream job guest is a man named Bob Morano. You may know him best, though, on social media as Every Day is Feast Day. If you follow him on Instagram, where he has 700,000 plus followers, or maybe you follow him on Facebook, he's got about 2 million there. Fun cooking videos that I think are as educational as they are delicious looking. I haven't tried them all, but I do want to eat my phone after I see them. I think with these videos, it's really all about the food, but Bob himself is this star that is a likable guy who feels warm, approachable, the kind of chef that maybe you might want to have in your own kitchen teaching you to cook. So I'm curious, Bob, how often do people invite you over to cook in their kitchen?
Well, I mean, I get in now. I get a lot of invites, but you always, I think, coming up in the industry when you cook professionally, there's that like delicate balance where people will invite you over to cook, or maybe sort of drop hints that they would like to come to your house to eat. But you're definitely like, it's suggested quite often that people want to eat your food, whether it be at their house or your own house.
That's going to be kind of tricky because if you're an attorney or you're a doctor, nobody thinks that you should just give them your services for free. I mean, I'm sure they may ask for advice or whatever, and that gets kind of wonky, but you're a plumber. No one's like, hey, come over and fix my pipes, and expects for free. But I imagine when it comes to being a professional chef, that gets to be a gray area sometimes.
Oh, all the time. Or you'll get invited to, it's one of the things that brings cooks sort of close together. There are a lot of these professional cooks are sort of a tight-knit group. It's like a brother sisterhood because we all sort of know, just the ins and outs of the industry itself, which is a specific industry, but also the sort of like common themes, the what are your favorite things to cook, the like what we're talking about now, or you'll get invited over to somebody's house and then they'll ask you to help. You go over there and, oh, how do I fix this gravy, or how do I do this thing? We're like, really, we want to go and eat and enjoy, and like the best thing you can do is invite a cook over to eat and not talk about food, talk about other things, hobbies, things like that. But it is pretty common that you get and we do, like, we have people over for dinner, we go over people's dinners, and we'll always bring dishes. Like I'll never show up empty-handed unless, we do have friends that will specifically say, they'll almost get visibly mad if you bring things. They'll tell you not to bring anything. We don't, not to do anything. But we're always bringing stuff and things like that. But it is, it's funny that you bring up the doctor thing or the attorney thing, because you wouldn't, or you'd never say, oh, hey, why don't you come over and do my taxes for free because you're an accountant.
I mean, wouldn't that be great? See, I feel like if you were coming over to a dinner party at my house, I fancy myself as somebody who couldn't handle himself in the kitchen. I don't know that I would want you to bring anything because I don't want you to show me up.
I mean, it is, and it's I guess for lack of a better term, it's I know where you're coming from, but at the same time, it's like professional cooks and chefs are some of the most humble guests you'll ever have in your home. Whether you overcook chicken or you make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, we're just as happy to eat things that we didn't have to think about or touch, stuff like that. But I had something that I forgot.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned overcooking chicken because that's something I want to talk about in a minute with you because I have some thoughts. But I remember hearing Wolfgang Puck one time talk about the question he gets asked most often is, oh, you guys must eat fabulously at home. And I've heard you talk about this on other podcasts as well. And his response was like, my wife can barely get me to make toast when I'm at home. I cook every single day, all day long. The last thing I want to do when I get home is cook. And I would imagine that's the same for most professional chefs.
Yes. And also there's significant others, whether it be boyfriends, girlfriends, husbands, wives, things like that. It's a funny, people will say, oh, you must eat so amazing all the time, or, what do you make on your day off? And it's like, especially, I'm older now, I'm 44 and I have kids, so we run a household. But, when you're a young cook, it's like cereal, sandwiches, anything easy. I will say you do fall, one of the fun things is, just as you get sort of better at speaking like the language of cooking, your days off when they do come and you don't have sort of the additional responsibilities of family and kids and stuff like that, you can dive into pretty deep experimental, you know, full Saturday long cooking sessions. Whether you have an idea you're trying to exercise or just a different experiment you're trying to work on, those definitely happen, but I would say for almost 100% of the time, that you're not trying to even think about food.
Well, I know that for so many chefs, this was something where there was a lifelong passion that became a professional one. Were you one of those kids who grew up in a family where food was a love language, and this was kind of the thing that you knew for a long time you wanted to do?
I definitely didn't know I wanted to do it for a long time. It took me years, like more recently, within the past decade or so, to realize that I did have sort of a influence around food and cooking that related, I'd say, mostly to my mother and my grandmother. Sort of just being in the kitchen and that time that becomes like more valuable. There's something more special about the time spent than just the cooking that you're doing. You know what I mean? But it definitely was not something when I was in high school and even middle school, I wanted to be an architect. I was always heavily into art, and I was always very good at math. And I found at a young age that architecture blended, it's like art with math attached to it. So I took a lot of architecture classes in high school and even a little bit in college here at a local community college. And, it's one of those things that's when you're in school, it's fun and it's art and it's experimental. And then when you get out and you do it in real life, it's drawing rectangles at a cubicle for 8 hours a day. And it just became, you go from this sort of into art person to you get a job where you're sitting at a desk and you go like, this is not me. I can't be sitting in this cubicle all day long. It drives you nuts. But I did
Well,
that. Oh, sorry.
no, no, I was going to say, but there is the mixture of art and science when it comes to cooking, especially when it comes to baking as well. So it feels like you get to do that every day in ways, or at least with your social videos, in ways that you never would have gotten to had you stuck with architecture.
Yeah, and it's interesting actually now that we're even just saying it out loud. I sort of noticed the transition into food and cooking, that art side of it. It flowed very well from the architecture world for me into food. But even now that we're even saying it out loud, we're talking about it. The content creation and the different things that go along with it. There's been so many different things, like even just learning about cameras and, I make everything myself. So I'm like the writer and the director and you figure all these things out as you go. So it becomes a lot of like, we're lucky we live in the time of information. So it becomes a lot of like research. And like this weekend, I'm going to spend, an hour of my time researching this one thing that I'm trying to figure out. And then you're sort of creatively putting that into practice.
You brought up the production of the videos. Are you shooting it all yourself? Do you have any help with that?
No, I'm shooting everything myself. I'm editing everything myself. I've brought my wife into the play, as we've grown. So she'll help with like, obviously if I ask her to come into the kitchen, I want to, can we film a wacky angle or something that I can't physically do on my own? She'll be there. But she helps me a lot with running some of the pages we post on all the different platforms. So she'll post on certain platforms, and then she'll deal with some of the emails, or she'll some comments will come in. She'll go, oh hey, there's this comment, you got to go reply to this comment. They're asking a question about this whatever. But she might on a page that she runs, I still shoot all the videos. She might go, okay, Wednesday I'm going to put up chicken, Thursday I'm going to put up pasta, and things like that, and sort of like orchestrate the flow of that. But yeah, we're doing everything, the two of us. I mean, we're doing everything.
I am in awe because I know how much work it takes to make a video. I know how much work it takes to cook a dish. And you add those things together, you add the editing, and it's almost like the layers on top of each other make it that much more difficult. And also, I don't know if you would have crossed paths before, but my brother is a pretty substantial food influencer. He's got, Bob, I mean like 18 million followers across all his channels.
Oh, wow. Okay. Who is your brother?
And my brother, Kyle is Took. He is more fun, kind of almost a comedic take on food videos. He'll take a blowtorch to a crescent roll some stuff like that. So really fun, kind of entertaining, engaging, that
Yeah.
side of food. But I know how much work he
Yes.
puts into these videos, and he does so much of it on its own. And I just have a great appreciation for all that comes into that. Oh, and also you're making a gourmet dish, by the way.
Yes. I'm just writing his name down. I'm sure that I have come across his stuff before,
Sure.
even though the name doesn't sort of ring a bell. But a lot of times, but I'm most certain that I've run across his stuff before. But I'm going to take a look and look him up. Yeah, there's a lot that goes in. Oh,
That's the world that you're in, though, right? It's
Yeah.
like this is this exploding portion of the social media sphere is specifically food and cooking videos.
yeah, it has been, and it's sort of. I mean, we sort of lucked out because it's like everybody eats. I would say venture to say most people cook at least a little bit. But everybody eats. And to me, one of the things that got me at first started is we no longer have like the educational food programs, those educational cooking shows. Like I said, I'm 44. I grew up in like the 80s and 90s. And I grew up, with the Julia Childs and the Emeralds and the Bobby Flays and the Alton Browns. And, Alton Brown is still like dabbling and it's so fun to see. But, those early, creators of that world. And to me, what they always gave the viewer is all of those people could walk into any restaurant anywhere in the world and work a shift and not lose, not blink an eye. And it sort of gives the general public doesn't have access to that. So you're giving the general public access to that piece that they bring, which we no longer have. A lot of cooking shows you see now, at least on mainstream TV, they'll either be actors or actors, they'll be actors from the 80s and 90s, or they'll be a person who created like a food blog from their farmhouse or something. But that's stuff that like the general public already has access to. The piece they don't have access to is the nitty gritty kitchen world. The piece that gets like woven into your fiber, your human fabric from spending, 2 decades in that professional industry, that you can only get from doing that, from putting that time in and dedicating your life to that industry. To me, that's where that came from.
No, and I think it's interesting too because we didn't really talk about your background. You went to the Culinary Institute of America, which, for people who don't know, is really where you want to be a trained chef. That is one of the places you go. And you went up in the Hudson Valley, is that right?
Yeah, I went to the campus in Hyde Park.
Okay, and spent some time on the West Coast pursuing your craft, and then ended up back in New York, which is where you grew up.
Correct. Yeah, we both my wife and I grew up here in New York in the Hudson Valley. Like I said, I went to the CIA, and then I had a job lined up in California, in San Francisco. So at the time we were still dating. So we got to like pick up, and I had a guaranteed job out there. We went out there and sort of did the career thing. We always knew we wanted to come back. All of our family is here. So we had the benefit of like doing the career thing for 5-6 years and then coming back here. And now, now we have kids in the house and we're near the grandparents and all that stuff. So it really worked out, for us there.
Was that a California adventure for you? Was it a positive experience?
It was very positive. It's one of the things, like the food industry has so much to teach. And, I got to go out there and learn that whole world is a very different world from even being here in New York. They're very different worlds. And I sort of lucked out all 4 years that I went to school. Myself and a group of very close friends, we worked a catering gig out in Sonoma County. So it just happened to line up. When I went to the CIA, you get a 3-week summer break. And that catering event lined exactly with our 3 weeks that we had off for our summer. So we would all buy plane tickets. We'd fly out there and we'd work that catering gig for the 3 weeks, and then we'd come back to school. We worked it all 4 years that we went to the CIA, and then probably a few more years after. But during that time, I had gotten offered a full-time position out of college. So it was like, let's try it out. We'll move out there. I have a job already lined up, guaranteed, so we can go out there. We figure it out. And then my wife does PR and marketing stuff. She actually ended up getting a job in the wine industry there, doing like PR and marketing for wineries, like a company that, dealt with wineries and stuff. So we both, talk about dream jobs. We both got to work like pretty cool jobs while we were out there.
Well, I was going to say, it really does sound like if you're in the PR and marketing industry and you like food at all, then that is a mecca for that kind of work. And boy, those Sonoma restaurants, the Napa restaurants, I mean, there are some of the world's finest, all within a few square miles of each other.
Yeah, there's a lot to do out there if you're in the food world, if you're in the food industry.
So I'm curious. You start making the videos, and you alluded to the educational, food videos or cooking videos that you grew up watching. And I hosted a show on the Food Network many years ago, a kitchen gadget show, and got to get it. So all about kitchen gadgets. And it was with Sonny Anderson, who's now one of their Food Network stars. And one of the things I learned when I was there from the executives, they were like, one, most people who watch cooking shows don't ever cook the food. It's like reading a travel magazine. You just look at the places you want to go. And that was the same thing with HGTV and DIY, is you don't end up really doing the projects. It just feels good to see other people doing the project. So I thought that was a really enlightening takeaway about those shows. And obviously there's an audience that learns from them and applies that. But a lot of people are just watching to watch because they like to talk about food. But I think that's also the transition time when they got away from some of the cooking stuff, because at some point, maybe there's a thought that there's only so many ways to tell people how to grill chicken. Let's go into the competition space. Let's go into the diners, drive-ins, and dives and all that kind of stuff, because they felt like there was growth there. But there still was that audience that wanted to learn, and it feels like that's really what you've tapped into.
Yeah, it does. I feel the same way. And it's sort of like, it's been super rewarding for me because initially, like we talked about before with the loss of the educational cooking shows, at the time, I've told this story before on my pages and stuff, but I had just come out of a teaching job. I was teaching, in addition to running kitchens full time, I was teaching once a month at a local school district. A food program, kindergarten through 8th grade. And we would go, and it was a literal in the classroom lessons, and we would do little recipes with even kindergartners, with box graders and all kinds of cool stuff. And I fell in love with it. It was just the coolest thing ever to see these kids learning about food. And then you start to realize, like, this should be in every school. Like, this needs to be part of kids' education. And then the pandemic came, again in New York, shut all the schools down, shut these programs down, and they never sort of reopened it. And I desperately missed that teaching piece. I got a little like taste it almost feels selfish because it was so rewarding to do. And I got a little taste of it, and I tried, locally with our school district or a couple different school districts. I tried to introduce a program, and nobody was really interested. I couldn't get any takers in the district. So I sort of I knew the audience existed on social media, and I reached a point where I just missed it so much. So I was like, I'm just going to start doing it, and we'll see where it goes. And, it's funny, like when you first started anything, you stink at it. No one watches it. You're terrible at it. So you have to sort of fail as fast as you can. So you start to figure out where you're going to go individually, because you can't do the same things as somebody else and expect to get results. It has to be your own thing. So I just started doing it. And you keep showing up every day, and it sounds silly, but it's like riding a bike. It's like if you practice riding a bike every single day, you're going to get pretty good at riding a bike. But if you ride a bike once a week, once a month, you're going to be, not a great bike rider. But it really does. And even, you make a good point with the Guy Fieri's, with the diners, drive-ins, and dives. He also comes from that professional food background, and he's in the kitchen. He's in the back of the house in these shows, giving people go and dine at these places. He goes to a place, and then the next month they have lines out the door. They can't feed people fast enough. So people go and eat in these places, and they go, oh, I wonder what the kitchen looks like. Oh, I wonder what the cook looks like. And he's back there talking to the guy. And now a lot of places will have open kitchens. You might recognize the guy from the Diner, Drives, and Dives show, the chef that was back there making your burger or whatever, and you see him through the window of the kitchen or whatever. And you're like, oh, there he is. I saw him and that's the piece that, but you're right. There is, most of the audience will never make what you make. And I think that also, the angle I try to take from my own content is to make things that I want to make. It's become a space that I get to make what I want, when I want, how I want to, and no one tells me today you have to do this, today you have to do that. So it's like, I can make something on an ingredient where I know it probably won't perform very well. It may not be a very popular ingredient, but I want to make it. I want to put it out there, and then it sort of becomes sort of like this living cookbook. If you buy you see a bulb of fennel and you go, oh, what do I do with this fennel? You're probably going to go to Google or TikTok or YouTube or one of these other platforms and go and type in fennel. What I need ideas to do with fennel, and there I am. I'll pop up. I might have like 5 or 6 different recipes of fennel. And it makes it fun for me. Like I'm making it for myself, but then in turn, as you get better at these things, if I can get a person to watch a full video of me talking about and making a fennel dish that has zero interest in fennel, zero interest in cooking, zero interest in whatever, they watch the video, there's a piece there that is valuable to me that I get the feedback from that. And I go, I know I'm doing things well in this video because someone's watching it for the entertainment aside from the cooking that goes into it.
I think it's this repository of all of this knowledge that you've accumulated, and you deliver it in such a way that is so relatable and so educational. And I think that was a missing kind of, like you said, we've missed that and we've lost that when it comes to cooking in some ways. But so when did you start? When did you first start putting videos online?
This past summer was 2 years ago. So probably, I guess about 2.5 years ago, I started. I had sort of dabbled, and I had put up some still shots of, like everybody does. You take pictures.
Sure.
You know, I'm in
Look
places.
what I made today.
Yeah, I'm making so much food that I go, oh, let me snap some shots of stuff, and you put it up. But it's like once a week, once a thing. But yeah, 2.5 years ago, I was at my full-time job and we were having our kitchen renovated. We had rented a food truck to sit outside so we could still feed guests. It was at a monastery, so it was sort of family-style catering. It wasn't like restaurant service. And so I was in a food truck all summer, and that was when I decided this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to start recording myself prepping carrots, prep whatever, just things that I think someone might find value in. And I set my phone up on a box of plastic wrap, no microphone, no lights. I'm in a dark, poorly lit food truck, and here I go. Here's how I'm going to cut these carrots. And in the beginning, it was like a video here, a video there when I had time. And slowly, for me, again, like I said, I made things that interest me, that made me curious. And it could be an ingredient, or it could just be, I wonder how this camera angle will look. Oh, I saw this other, like you start to see things in other people's content or other people's like creative avenues. And you go like, oh, I wonder how I could pull that off. And you start like that also keeps you curious. So that in itself got me making more content. And then you start to get a little bit of eyes on your stuff and you go like, oh, I see these other people doing, they have a business in what I'm doing. And you start to see yourself becoming a little bit. And and that little bit gets a little bit more and a little bit more. And I reached a point where I was like, there's something here. I feel like I need to start treating this as a business. And then is when it really starts kicking in and you start, you set up a camera or my phone or whatever. I think there's value in this. I think there's value in this. And you start creating multiple pieces of content to be able to post multiple times a week. And it just snowballs into what it is today. And now I do it full time. I have left my full-time job. And this is what I do full time. And that's where it came from.
Man, it's such a cool story because obviously so many people are kind of waking up to the creator economy. And even myself, having left my full-time morning news job to transition into, content creation. And I am more energized than I have been in a long time. Just about because the world is your oyster and the sky is the limit. And that doesn't mean that it's easy, but if you're passionate about it, you almost can't imagine doing anything else, I would imagine.
Yeah. And I always say it, we always have a saying in my house, whether it's like my kids' sports or whatever, and it's always cheesy, but if it was easy, everyone would do it. But people
Preach.
and people see the end result. No one sees, again, we're almost getting to like this motivational stuff, but it really is I mean, it is what it is. Because you'll get asked like, oh, I have friends who own businesses even locally, and they'll say, oh, how do I do this? How do I make like I'm a real estate agent, or I have a plumbing business. How do I get into this? And it's like, the real story is to like, just start doing it. Take your phone out of your pocket, record yourself installing a toilet, and you're going to fail and you're going to stink and you're going to whatever. But if you want to know, that's how you do it. And you'll start to, you have to show up every day. It's just what it is. But it isn't, it is exciting. It's like, it's so frustrating. And at times it's such a lonely place to be, because it's weird. It's a weird, when you first start, I'm 44. You go to the kids' school things, and people will go, "Oh, I saw your video on Facebook." And like, when you first start, it's like this. I'm dancing on the internet, and then but in that in itself, again, you make it for yourself. You go, "Who cares? This is what I'm going to do. I'm determined to do it, and no one can tell me otherwise. I'm going to do it." And that's really the mentality that you have to have. But I will say also, like you had said, along the way, I've had some of the most amazing creators, far bigger than I. Over time, sometimes people will reach out to you, whether it's a direct message or an email or something like that, and they'll go, "Hey, I've been watching your stuff. You're doing a really great job, blah blah blah." And they might have 20 million followers. They might have whatever the case is, and they're doing like these crazy brand deal stuff and commercials and all this stuff. And that has its own. That's a whole nother area you can get into, but they'll reach out and you get a connect. And I have a few people that you exchange phone numbers with, and you get on text threads, and it's almost like you get this little cheat code, not in the way of you're skipping out work, but they'll have answers to questions. You get to pick their brains that would take you another 2 years to be able to figure out, because that's what they've been doing. So it's like this collection of people that like, they want to see other people succeed. And then as a person that's, sort of lower in than them, you get to see what that looks like in real time. Oh, this guy's been at it for 6 years, 8 years. And that's where they're at. They're showing up every day. Because like, you have, it's a weird place to be, and you have ups and downs. You'll have a week or even a month. I left my full-time job in just before Christmas. So even so, I might have a month where I still do way better than I did at my full-time job, but you rely so heavily on making this content, and you go like, oh man, this week what didn't, or this month, or this video, or this whatever. And you start to like, both, you have to tell yourself, but you start to meet these people that go like, it's not about the one video. It's not about the week. It's not about the month. Like, this is what you do now. So you show up every day, and this is what you do. Do you want to be this, or do you not want to be this? Do you want to go back to working in a kitchen, or do you want to go back to, doing what somebody else tells you to do every day and stuff like that? So the community, at least for the people that I've been in contact with, has just been like incredible.
It's really cool to hear you describe all that. And you made a quip at the beginning about how we're veering into motivational, speaking territory. But I think some of that stuff holds true. I mean, if it was easy, everybody would do it. And you do have to put one foot in front of the other. It is about it's all that stuff, right? I think it all comes true. And you realize like, oh, there's a reason why these things are cliches. But I imagine along the way, you mentioned, when you started this, what was the moment that you thought, okay, this thing can go, this could really be it? Was it one video? Was it one message maybe?
I don't think it was one video. I will say, like, I know everybody says this, but like, I have the best followers collectively. You can't possibly see or answer all of the messages and the comments and the things that you get, but I see so many of them, and even from the beginning. People were, oh, it's so refreshing I'm learning so much. I'm doing this and a lot of whatever. But in those stages, like, that keeps you going, because you go like, this is why I set out to do this. If 10 people watch my video, and half of them go, oh, I learned this new thing, or, oh, I made this recipe yesterday. Like, that's the whole point. So it's like, you just have to keep doing it long enough to where enough people find value to where you can turn it into something that makes sense for you financially, and it will. You keep providing value, and that's the point. Like, that's what sells, is the value. But to answer your question, I don't think it was a specific video. The view count started to climb a little bit, but to be honest, I think it was when we first started making money. Some of these, as some people know, some of these platforms will monetize you. They'll pay you for views. They'll pay you for ads that run on your videos, or even just for algorithmic feeding. They'll pay you basically, because you're putting so much data and information into these algorithms. But and it starts like, you make a little bit of money and you're like, oh, that's cool. It's like a tank of gas I made this month. And then you keep showing up and it gets a little bit more. And then your month gets a little bit more comfortable. And then like your life gets a little bit more comfortable. And then you keep showing up, and then it starts to turn, and you go like, I could live, like, I'm almost making what I make at work. Like, I might be able to live off of this. And you keep going, and then you go like, I need to be all full pedal to the metal. This is what I need to be doing. And it's that moment that you have with yourself. It's like, we had it, it's like, do I make that jump? Can I make that jump? And then I was lucky enough where I had a great full-time job. And I loved my job that I had before this. I love this more because it's just something I'm more passionate about. But I loved my job before. It was a fantastic job. And the person who came and took my place there, they're going to have a fantastic job. It's a great job, the job I had. Yeah, but you reach a point where I was lucky enough to have that moment where I go, it doesn't make any sense to not jump. Why am I not jumping? Do I not believe in myself enough? Can I believe in myself enough to where I jump? And like, you have the real moment. And to me, it was a big difference between like believing in yourself. Like, can I run this 5K? I believe in myself. I've been putting in the time and effort. I can run this 5K. I can do it. But it's like, can you believe in yourself enough to like dance on the internet and pay for your house and feed your kids? And like really, really become what will I be in 5 years if I keep doing this? What will I be in 10 years if I keep doing this? And for me, you see people like Jacques Pepin. He just turned like 91 years old, and he's on YouTube and he's on PBS, and he's still doing this. It's like, I can do that. Why can't I do that at 91? Anyone can do it at 91. You're no different than anybody else.
Well, I think you're 100% right. And you run that 5K and you're like, well, maybe I can do a 10K. Well, a half marathon seems a little out of reach, but you know what? I've been training and I ran 10 miles last week. Maybe I can do a half. So I think it is that building and that betting on yourself. But there's also a sense of, if you don't feel that way and you don't want to take that risk, then maybe this isn't for you. I think there's that kind of delineation as well, that some people have an appetite for that and the passion for it. And if you don't have the passion for it, then that probably isn't, what you want to be doing, because the amount of work that goes into it, you got to love it. And even when it's not fun. And I think that it sounds like that really is the case for you, especially the teaching component. Cause I think you that desire to teach others seems like a pretty substantial through line for you in this story.
Yeah, and I think you're right too. Again, like, I can only bring my own perspective, and I'm definitely an outgoing person, and sort of like, it's like it works for me because I've always sort of talked a lot. Like, even as a young kid, I was always like talking about something, or talking somebody's ear off where you could tell that they don't want to be listening anymore, but you're a kid, so they listen. But yeah, so you're definitely right there. But I will say, especially with this, if you're not passionate about what you're doing, I don't think you'll get to a point, not even to have to make the decision, do I do this full time? I don't think you're going to stop much earlier. Because the other piece about it is that, like you touched on it, it has to be something that you're passionate about, and it can change. We all change. You can start and go, oh, this is what I'm all about. And then like you go, oh, maybe I figured out that I'm a little bit. And if you keep showing up every day and do what you want to do, I mean, it has to be what you want to do, not what you think people want to see.
Mm-hmm. But I think that's even the idea of a dream job, is it's not necessarily the job when you were 8 years old you dreamt about. It's that realization of so many dreams that maybe all come together. I mean, I know for me as a kid, I wanted to be a doctor growing up. That was my dream job. And it was kind of falling into broadcast journalism and this kind of work that really tapped into the part of me that was most me. And sometimes you're building the dream as you go, and it becomes the dream job, or you make it the dream job. And I think that's empowering, because for some folks who weren't fortunate enough when they were younger to have this vision of what they wanted to be, and they wonder what is it, it's like there's still time. You can figure that out, by kind of coalescing the parts of you that are most fulfilling. And it sounds like you and your wife have really been able to kind of craft that in so many ways.
Yeah, we have. I mean, we're fortunate. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
We've been fortunate in that way in, that putting out things that both like have value in them and that people have sort of been receptive to. But I mean, it's a really interesting point when you bring up like that you dreamed of being a doctor, or what you dream about, because we all, whether you have the classic like I want to play for the Yankees, or you're out at 8 years old, you're throwing yourself pop-ups in the dictating the bottom of the ninth and all that stuff. I'm going to steal this from an F1 driver that I recently just listened to. But he was talking about like when I was a young kid, and this is a current F1 driver, but when I was a young kid, I dreamed about being an F1 driver, and I dreamt about like being in the car, driving the car. I didn't dream about tire temperatures and the heat data of the different things and the outcomes and the thing. I dreamt about being in the car and driving the car. And like, if you don't, obviously we all have to but if you don't take time to realize that, you're going to miss it. Like, you're going to miss, you could be in your dream. Obviously I'm not a doctor. And if you are a doctor, there's a bazillion things real tangible things that you need to be worried about. But when you were 8 years old, dreaming about being a doctor, it was like, I want to help people. I want to make people better. And like, I think it's like being in touch with your 8-year-old self may be the most valuable piece, at least of that mindset of living in your dream or working your dream job.
I think that's interesting. That being in touch with the little kid that's still inside you. I mean, that sounds like a therapy session, but I think that's a cliche for a reason, because hopefully we all do have aspects of that little kid inside us, the kind of wonder and the joy and the passion and all that kind of stuff. I mean, you talked about being a dad earlier. I've got 3 boys, and I see that in them, and I'm like, oh gosh, please do not ever extinguish that flame. I don't care what you apply it to, but apply it to something, because it is so powerful and so awesome, I think, to see. But I am curious who the F1 driver was that you heard this interview with.
Oh, oddly enough, it was the very young. So it was like interesting to hear him say that.
Is it Kimi?
Yes. Kimi Antonelli on the Mercedes team. Yeah. Yep.
Kimi just won his first race.
And he's a baby. Yeah. And he's a baby. And just to hear, it's almost like he's letting us mid 40-year-olds know that like he remembers that. He's like, how much do you remember of being an 8-year-old?
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah.
I've become a big F1 fan recently, and my kids love it too. So what he says really resonates. Seeing my kids now think they want to be F1 drivers. So. I want to get back to the cooking. My mom, I don't know, a couple months ago, made these oatmeal cinnamon salt cookies, something like that. Unbelievable. They were the best homemade cookies I've ever had. They were on the level of what you'd get, when you go to Crumble or, one of these amazing cookie places. And turns out later, I think she got the recipe from you. I think they're your cookies. Does this ring a bell?
It may. I put out a video. I have a cookie that I like to make a oatmeal raisin, but it has like extra molasses in it.
I don't know, man. It had some cinnamon and it was dusted with salt, and it was unbelievable.
I do have a trick that I've been doing forever that I've mentioned a few times in videos, but lately it's been getting a lot of attention, is the salt on the cookie sheet before you put the raw dough on the cookie sheet.
Oh, okay.
And then it bakes into the bottom crust of the cookie. So it creates this different sort of dynamic. Then when you eat a cookie, you usually eat it with the bottom on the, so that salty crust hits your tongue first.
See, that's like next level thinking. Is what part are you gonna? Because the salted on the top, one, I think that's an overlooked. I think for as much as we overuse salt, sometimes we don't use it in the right ways when we cook. But two, you're putting it where it's going to actually hit the tongue and you're going to taste it right away. That's clever.
Yeah, and it's a different, and really, it really just started sort of as an idea from the cookies that you see with like the Maldon or like the coarse sea
Yeah.
salt on top. Delicious. It looks very nice in a case. Like if you go to a bakery, those cookies look very pretty with the sparkly salt on top. But I would say that to me anyway, the salt on the bottom, it will change your how you look at cookies. It's more of a culinary adventure than it is an eye. You know, if you've never eaten a cookie with extra salt on it, the crunchy cooked salt on the top will change your life how you eat cookies. This just sort of changes it in a different sort of perspective, I think, to me.
Yeah. Well, I think seasoning is one of those things that, and look, very amateur home chef, but is one of those tricks that once you learn how to do it, it elevates everything. And it could be a cookie, it could be toast. If you haven't thrown a little salt on your toast, you're kind of surprised. Like, I didn't know toast could taste this good.
Oh, yeah.
So that kind of brings up, you talk about a tip or trick like that. What is the biggest mistake you think home cooks make on a regular basis?
Ooh, currently, I've actually been getting a lot of questions about this currently. Like some stuff you can see it'll trend. Like you'll get a whole bunch of questions on a certain topic, and then next month you'll get a bunch of questions on a different topic. Currently, I would say that I think people are using too high of a heat on their pans when they're cooking. First, I think people are using too low of a heat in their ovens. But we're not talking about baking, anything where you need to be exact. I'm talking about roasting vegetables or even roasts in general. But also using too high of a heat in a pan on the stovetop when you're searing meats, more specifically. I would say people, to me, are using too high of a heat and still not letting their pans properly preheat. So you're getting a situation where you put a meat or an item in the pan, and your heat is too hot, but the pan is not preheated enough. So then you're going to stick, and then by the time the item goes in there, now you're burning and smoking because the temperature was too hot on your burner. Where like I've been trying to do more and more content focusing on that, where you want to use slightly lower heat, but give your pan more time to heat. So in essence, you're bringing that pan up to the temperature of the burner, but the temperature of the burner is a nice even heat. It's not this screaming high thing. So you're accomplishing two things. You're using a proper heat, and you're creating less heat loss when you add the item to the pan.
I watched a video the other day that was getting into heat retention, and we all think cast iron holds heat really, really well, which it does. But it was almost on the scientific side of, okay, you can hold heat, but if you can't transfer that held heat to the meat properly, then, have you, kind of put yourself behind the eight ball. It is amazing how much those little things matter and add up when you're cooking. But so that's one you said you've been getting a lot lately. Is there a tip or trick that changed your life and wows the most people when you share it with them, whether it's online or in real life?
I mean,
I'm sure you have hundreds.
Currently the salt on the cookie thing has been getting a lot of
Yeah.
attention. I recently just got reached out to somebody writing a magazine article. They wanted to use it in their article, and they were asking like if it was okay if they used it. And I've been, it's funny because like I've been talking about that specific tip for quite a while in my content. I throw it in here and there. I will also say that this is a little bit off topic, but the proper heat use in your pans will also make your stainless steel pans and things like that much easier to clean. But yeah, so I don't know if there's a specific, if there's a specific tip. I think the best feedback I get are things that I have gathered in my experience in cooking in professional restaurants, to where they're things that you do normally that you don't think are special, but they tap into someone's like, sometimes you can see it in real time where they haven't been able to figure something out about their own cooking. And just you exposing that thing or talking about that thing, they go, oh, like they make the connection on their own. And of course, I can't think of any specific ones
Sure.
currently, but it's just sort of that theme. Like you spend so much time cooking and prepping, and great food is great in great restaurants because of the repetition. You do the exact same thing every single time, every single day, the same way. You create systems to eliminate failure points. It could be grilling a piece of chicken. You create a system within grilling that piece of chicken to eliminate any possible failure points, or as many as you can, so that the guest gets the exact same grilled chicken breast every single time they come to your place. And every single chicken breast is the exact same that goes out. If you do 100 of them in a night, the goal is to make every single one the same. Your home cook cannot do this. It's slicing onions. How do you use a knife like that? Well, it's like buy 100-pound bags of onions and start slicing them every day at home in your kitchen. That's how you do it. So it's those little things, but I think the people find the most value when they make the connections themselves. Like they put the puzzle pieces together because of this little. It's like you give them that little missing piece. And it's not necessarily specific. It's more specific to their issue they're having. If that makes sense.
Interesting. Yeah, no, and you brought up the grilled chicken, and I said at the very top of the episode that we'd get into chicken because I think that's one of those things for me that I put the pieces together on, and a big part of it was because I enjoy cooking sous vide when I get a chance to, and that kind of got me thinking about, well, wait a second, we're reading these temperature charts all wrong. We're all told to cook chicken to 165, et cetera, and we know the health and salmonella reasons why. But you start learning about the logarithmic scale of, chicken at 165 is safe, but 155 for whatever it is, 5 or 10 minutes, that's also safe. And so my chicken hack has been, I'm never cooking it to 165. I'm always cooking it, maybe 10 degrees, 15 degrees less, and letting it rest, letting it sit, checking it with a thermometer so I know that we're in the ballpark. And the difference it makes is astounding, whether it's, on a skillet, whether it's in the oven, whether it's off the grill. So little things like that, it's like now I have this thing that I know how to do that is just standard, is a stock, because you've done it so many times, nowhere near what you'd see in a kitchen, a professional kitchen, obviously. But that's part of the joy, I think, is you start adding all these little things. And that's why it's fun cooking with, your grandparents or, somebody who's been in the kitchen their whole life, is they have all these little details that they've picked up over all those years of experience.
Yeah, and I think also as society, we've sort of lost the value that like people that are older than you bring, like even just the knowledge they have and the things they've seen and the experiences they've had. But yeah, and a very common temperature. It's funny. I mean, sous vide now is everywhere. The immersion circulators are everywhere. They're super accessible to the public. I remember when they first came out, they were like these $5,000 giant tabletop, only the French laundries and right. I could never even our restaurant, we could never afford to get one in there. We used to build them. Like we'd go to Home Depot and buy all the parts and we'd build them so that you could sous vide in like a cooler. But we would make homemade immersion circulators. But now you can buy them on Amazon for $50 or whatever they are. And a very common temperature to sous vide chicken breast too is like 145 degrees, and you sous vide in there because it sits in there for 2 hours, 4 hours, however long you sit it in there, and then you're going, most of the time you're going to open that package up and you're going to either sear it or grill it or finish it. It just adds the flavor, but you're already cooked. And you can look, the FDA now has published all of their charts. Like you can look them up on the FDA's website, straight from the FDA. Another great source is Texas A&M does incredible work with all of their testing and making all of their testing, publicly available. But yeah, even 145 degrees Fahrenheit will disinfect the same bacteria as 165 degrees. But like you said, it's like a few minutes. I think 155 is like 40 seconds. 165 is instant. And even as low as like 145, I think it's like 145 for like less than 2 minutes or something. But as
when you're not serving it that quickly either. Who's eating it, right off the grill? So. No,
and yeah, the thing you're talking about is called carryover cooking. When you even something as small as a chicken breast or as big as like a roast, you take out of the oven, the temperature will keep climbing once you remove it from the oven. So the goal in the perfect world, when you remove the chicken breast from the grill or a roast from the oven, is to just barely get to that safe temperature. Not to cook it to the safe temperature and then you take it off, because then you blast past that safe temperature, and that's how you get that dry, chewy, chalky chicken breast. And I will say, like, cooking a perfect chicken breast is a different type of flex. You know, I mean, it
I wouldn't
really
say
is.
I've gotten to perfect. I think I've gotten to solidly good.
Well, and like you said, I mean, you have created systems within your world, within the way that you do it and how often you do it, to eliminate those failure points. To just create the best chance you have at making that successful, delicious chicken breast. So, like, you know, and you're at the point now where, like, if you say you skipped something or you rushed something or you whatever, you overdid it and you ended up with a dry chicken breast, it would be disappointing. You go, oh man, and it would live in your head. And then you go, okay, next time, like the next time you do chicken breast, you're going to remember that when you failed at your systems that you had. Mm-hmm.
Well, you brought up sous vide immersion circulators. What is your favorite? Do you have a favorite kitchen gadget or your tool that you're like, oh my gosh, you cannot live without this? That's, you know, obviously not your skillets or your knives, but what might check that box for you?
Yeah, I don't. I mean, I wouldn't say I can't live without it, but recently I bought an air fryer that I've been playing around with. I'm very late to the party with the air fryer
Game
game.
changer.
I know they're probably out of style even now, but I got one because I like to eat a decent amount of meat in my diet, and it always stinks up the house, you know. And if it's not, like, I live in New York, so I have no shame in grilling in the snow, but sometimes it's like, you know, I just want to whatever. And you know, then the house smells, and my wife is like, everything smells like the chicken or the steak or the whatever. So I got an air fryer for that purpose, to, like, I can throw stuff in here, even if I just use it to cook meat, and then I make a little salad or whatever. So that one I've been having a lot of fun playing with, just using my, you know, you start to use your experience as a professional chef to go, like, what can I do with this thing? So that's currently my favorite thing to play with, I would say. Oh, okay. The kitchen tool that I cannot live without, even I'm a professional, is a meat thermometer. If you don't have a meat thermometer, buy a meat thermometer. It will change your life. Shame on you if you don't have a meat thermometer. No shame, but get a meat thermometer, please, please, please. If you're serious at all, even not serious, it will change your life if you don't own a meat thermometer.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I feel like the more I cook, the more I rely on it, as opposed to the opposite. You think like, oh, you've grilled steak 100 times, you know, but it's like, no, I don't want to miss the interior temperature, the chicken especially. That, like, or, you know, we have a family. We've got 6 people in the house, so when you're making that much chicken, they're not all the same thickness. You know, one piece is coming off a minute before the other one, and that thermometer I 100% rely on. So you're right about that. And I do think on the air fryer, we got the kind that's like the toaster oven and the fryer, so it's a glorified convection oven, because they have some that have the basket.
Yes,
but ours is the convection type. So that's our daily toaster. But also, man, roasting vegetables. I mean, it's a game changer for that. You don't have to heat up the oven. You don't have to broil. You don't have to deal. It's like 10 minutes. You're good. And again, game changer. So no shame in the air fryer.
Yeah, and it's been something fun to play with. You know, it's like when you first get it, it's the same thing. You first get it, and I'm going to try this, and it sort of fails. Like, I'm like, oh, the potatoes aren't cooked, and the chicken is now cooked, and now I have to, like. But over time, you know, you start messing around with it, and it's just been fun. It's been fun to play with. We got like a glass one. My wife is like super into, like, you know, no chemicals in the house, and she's a breast cancer survivor. So, like, so we, like, go, you know, all of our stuff like that. So she actually found the one that we got. We got this glass one, but it's same. You know, they pretty much do a lot of the same stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. We could go nerd out about kitchen gadgets all along, because in case I forgot to mention, I did host a kitchen gadget show.
Yeah, I'm sure you saw some just real cool stuff. One of my biggest, like, pet peeves are the single job, single use tools. Like, oh, this only cleans an avocado. This only does this one thing. It's like, I can 100% put my money where my mouth is, and there are other tools that will do that equally well or better that will also do other things in your kitchen.
Yes, or there's another way to do it where you don't have to buy the tool.
Technique,
Like
yeah.
an avocado slicer, you don't have a knife, you don't have a fork, you don't have a spoon.
Mhm.
We have cupboards full of that kind of stuff. I'm curious. You mentioned that you left your job. You had been a chef at a monastery, right?
Mhm.
And now, is
Yep.
that where you shot all your videos, or where do you shoot them now?
That's where I shot all my videos. I started in the food truck, but I would say I didn't really get, by the time our kitchen had been renovated, newly renovated, is sort of when I really started to find my own making the content, to where I felt that was starting to make things that were consumable, watchable. But yeah, so I worked there for 11 years, even though I only started making content a little over 2 years ago. But that's where I shot all my videos. I would basically like take a lunch break and make a video, or I would go, oh, I have to cut a 50-pound bag of carrots today, so I'm going to set my camera up and a little tripod, set myself up. I'm going to cut the carrots, and I'll shoot a little 5-minute thing that I can edit into a minute-long clip while I'm prepping and things like that. And in the beginning, they really liked it. It generated a lot of attention for the monastery. A lot of their clientele, it was like a monastery retreat center. So people come and stay and retreat there. And they can, when they're maxed out, they can sleep about 50 people. And then they have about 20 live-in monks that live on campus full time. So you're feeding at most 70 people, but you're at least feeding the 20 monks that are there full time.
And do you still use that kitchen now, or where are you shooting?
No, I rent a local charity kitchen that's near me. There's a charity, they're called Sparrow's Nest. They feed families going through cancer treatments. And they have an industrial kitchen that they use only a couple days a week. And I reached out to them when I started to sort of figure out, like, hey, I think I'm going to be able to make this move. I had reached out to them and was like, hey, can I use your kitchen? Can I rent your kitchen? And so that's what I do now. I rent their kitchen monthly, which is so cool because when we were going through our treatment, we used their service. And now I get to make a monthly donation to the charity, like from the views that I have created with this content. And even in shooting there, they have said that they get more attention. They're getting more phone calls for donations and selling T-shirts and things like that. But now I'm in a position where our family's all good, we're all good, and now I get to make a monthly donation, like feeding families that are going through what we went through like 7.5 years ago.
It seems like that's been a through line for some of the stuff you've done before. I know you've talked about the wanting to teach for the local school kids, and I know there was some other things that you've done to kind of get food in the hands of people that need it. You talked about the Sparrow's Kitchen. Is that a really important to you, giving back in some form or another? That's part of all of this.
Yeah, it is very important. It's an important thing to me to be able to do. And it's just, it's like, it almost feels selfish because like I get to do that now. And like, I built this thing that, granted we're working, we're always building on it. And hopefully it just keeps going and keeps going. But it's like, there's been so many things. And I think, when you go through something like the cancer treatments that we went through and things like that, when your life goes through something like that, your perspective on everything changes. Like you can never unsee, and sort of like you can never go back. And there are so many people that help. And there are so many like amazing people that you meet, and different things that you see, that to be able to be in a position now to be able to do stuff that was helped us or done for us is really special to me. It just really is. And then my son is on the autism spectrum, so we do a lot of stuff with different autism stuff, and he goes to a local autism school that we do a lot of stuff with. And it's just it's the same. It's like all these things like change your perspective to where you can never go back, and you meet just these incredible people. Like there are amazing businesses that before we went through this stuff, you drive through town and you see these businesses every day. And then when you go through something like that, you go like, oh, this business is like donating, is like giving like $100,000 a year to these charities, or giving their time, or using their platform, whatever it be, their local platform, to help generate interest and funds and things like that for these charities that are incredible. Like, these people are helping so many people, and like, this is what they do for a living. They're in this every day. And when you see stuff like that, it's like, how, like, to be able to have brought my life to a place where now I get to help. Like I said, it feels selfish, but it's so cool to do. It's so cool to do.
Well, I think your content is so cool. I'm curious, and you've been so generous with your time today as we kind of wrap things up. I'm curious what the neatest moment about this experience has been. Has there, maybe it's somebody who reached out, maybe it's like, I can't believe, Bobby Flay saw my content. What's been the really most heartwarming aspect of this experience for you?
There's definitely been cool moments, but I mean, really, to be honest, for me, it's like like working with the different charity stuff, or hearing, like, anytime I've made content about sort of our story, I've touched on it a little bit, nothing, crazy, whatever, but just here and there. I'll get messages from people that are either going through horrific things currently, or have gone through those things, and you hear these people's stories. And like, these are real people. They're not celebrities. They're not, living in mansions somewhere. They're like they're going to their job every single day, and like, they're living they're normal, but they're real people that are like doing this stuff. Like, they're showing up to life every day, and no matter what, they face some of the most horrific things that you can think of, and they're just, I can't believe we came out of it, or we came out of it, and now me and my kids, we donate our time, we do this thing. Like, that's the coolest thing. Although I will say, just so we're not like in the doom and gloom, a little bit ago, Gavin Rosdale started following me. So that was like, I'll be in my room, like with my CD player, like turned up to 11.
And Glycerin comes on and you're like, yes,
absolutely. Yeah. That, I mean, to say that I was a kid in high school, just blasting all that stuff, is the understatement of the year. Like, I probably wore my CD out. That was like when we first started to get CDs, but I probably wore it out to wouldn't play anymore. And then I get a notification one morning, I wake up that Gavin Rosdale started following me. So I was like, hold on, I'll be, I like did the scream, thing. But stuff like that, that's cool. Like, that feels good and it feels cool, but it's somewhat not real in that world. I'm not saying Gavin, if he listens to this, I'm not saying he's not real.
If Gavin Rosdale, if you are listening, get a meat thermometer.
Get a meat thermometer. And I saw he's doing sort of a little cooking show. I think he's doing like a cooking show, YouTube or something like that. So yeah, if you're listening to this, I'm in. I'll come out. I'll be more than happy to show up. And I promise not to wear a Bush t-shirt. I feel it'd be bad luck.
Well, I don't know how we top this, Bob, because you have been so generous with your time today. And I really appreciate the content that you put out as somebody who loves to cook, but it's not just the food. It's not just the cooking. It's just the underlying message and ethos. I think everything that you talked about in terms of giving back, I think that really comes through in your content. You feel it when you watch your videos and when you see how you approach food and the respect you have for your audience. And I'm just grateful, one, that your content exists and that it's blowing up for you, and two, for you sharing time with us today. It's been a real joy getting to chat with you.
Yeah, thanks. Likewise, it was wonderful meeting. I had a blast, and like I said, I wouldn't be doing this if people weren't watching it. So it's just, I mean, what a cool thing.